Hey friends. So, day 3 of the Intermountain Suzuki String Institute was today. And it was great. Another spectacular day. I was giving Annalise a compliment at the end of the day, and I think it really landed with her. I was telling her, she's basically done 9 hours of music today. Not all violin practice, but music. But some of it was choir, some of it was going to concerts and listening. Some of it was practicing at home. But she did an entire 9+ hour day. And I don't know too many 5-year-olds who do that. Maybe some of the other kids at this thing, but it was really, really. I could tell she was moved by it. I could tell she thought it was. She got that it was cool. And so rather than recap the day, which there was just a bunch of great stuff there, but a couple things really jumped out at me. For one thing, well, I'm just trying to organize. There's a couple of events I want to touch on, and one of them, I guess I'll start with the one that happened in class, because right at the end of one of the classes, the teacher who I spoke a little bit about yesterday, he's just a spectacular pedagogue. He does all this physical comedy and just super playful stuff to keep the kids on track, but he also has a real seriousness. None of the comedy, none of the playfulness is in some ways he's one of the most strict about kids not playing in the background while he's talking, or talking in the background while he's playing or talking. He's really pretty rigorous about when the teacher's speaking, the class is silent, you're following the teacher, you're paying attention, you're making eye contact, you're staying focused. He does more than any other teacher I've seen here, really, to kind of marshal that level of focus from the kids. But he does all of it with a light touch and this playful air. Just everything is playful. It's remarkable. And right at the end, he spoke to the parents, and he said, Dr. Suzuki was very firm, very adamant about the fact that children are like soft clay, and whatever is being, children are a product of their environment. And so whatever is happening around them is what is being impressed upon their personality. He said any meanness, any cruelty, any thoughtlessness, carelessness that we allow ourselves, we're imprinting that upon our children. And then he talked about, people who bring negative energy into a space. He said if we allow that into our life, we're also allowing that into the lives of our children. We're allowing that poison into the lives of our children. And it really struck me, because I had been thinking about the kinds of relationships that I want to encourage Annalise to have, and in some ways there's a handful that I want to discourage. I have this sense of I don't think this is a healthy energy. And I found myself kind of having to I found myself thinking about that, and then it was like his comments, his very firm, just short statement at the end of class really felt like it was speaking to me. It was like, I hear that. That is coming to me for a reason. He even addressed the parents. He said, I'm speaking to the parents right now. So that was one thing. It was kind of an affirmation of, because there's a way in which I had been wanting to draw a firm boundary, and I'd had this impulse, I'd had this sense of there's a certain kind of energy certain people bring, and I just don't want it around. And I was like, well, but am I being too hardcore? Am I being too judgmental? And what I got from his statement was, no, that energy doesn't feel right. Don't allow it in your life. Don't allow it in. And the main thing with me was I was noticing the influence on Annalise. I'm noticing the effect. And so I was like, I want it out. I don't want it around. So that was one thing. The other thing that happened is I was working with Annalise this evening, which is remarkable. And, well, actually, this has happened a couple times, not necessarily in the evenings. It's happened yesterday after our play date. There's a certain thing I do that I'm trying to observe in myself, and basically, when Annalise stops listening, when she in the context of practice, it's usually like losing focus and just throwing up her hands and giving up or going off and not continuing the work. That can sort of get me to a place where I want to get more firm, or when it can also happen just like yesterday it happened. She was speaking to me in a really disrespectful way, and I called her on it. And I adopt a certain level of firmness. And there's a particular moment when I tip from holding a boundary to asserting a boundary, to sort of like, it's like I go in and I decide that I'm gonna take charge or take away, I think she perceives it as me taking away her decision-making power. And there are some very rare moments when that's appropriate and called for and necessary, and even you could even argue it's empathic at that point in those instances. But the way in which it happens for me is more that I just get tired, and so I get to that place. And it never fails to create a sense of injustice in her. She says, but it's not fair. I was just saying this. And I think what I'm not noticing or not acknowledging enough is how much a child, we talk about surrender. We talk about adults and as sort of people who are committed to deep practice, spiritual evolution. We talk about being in surrender, and by surrender I mean giving ourselves over to whatever we're doing, and that might mean surrendering to a phenomenal effort we are making in the moment, which may be costing us a lot of energy, and not necessarily in a negative way, but it just means we may be making a tremendous effort, and we have to surrender to the fact that that's where we are. And there's all kinds of things we have to surrender to. We have to surrender to love. We have to surrender to aging. We have to surrender to all kinds of things. But one of them is intense effort. We have to be willing to say, in a moment of intense effort, I'm okay making this effort. And what happens then is we internally relax. Even if it's wherever the working surface is, it doesn't mean we drop our focus or drop our effort for an instant. It just means we stop resisting the fact that we're making an effort. And when we get to that place of surrender, it's very empowering, and it's usually a moment of liberation, if we can genuinely get there. What we forget, or what at least I'll speak for myself, what I can easily forget, is just how much children are living in surrender all the time. They are not empowered in the same way that adults are to determine what happens to them, where they are going, what they are doing. That those tasks are outsourced to their parents and authority figures and caregivers. So that means that the psychology of a child is already so much at the mercy of everything coming at them, that when they push back against an individual thing that's happening, or a particular moment, or a particular thing that's being asked of them in a moment, they're pushing back against something, against an isolated thing within an overall context of total surrender, which is quite different than the experience of surrender as an adult. Because as an adult, we at least have the illusion that we are determining our lives. Now, that may be part of our problem, and we may need to actually find a deep level of surrender that doesn't involve us needing to be in control of everything. But from the point of view of just comparing the experience of an adult to the experience of a child's psyche, in their experience of the world, it's not far-fetched to say that adults have more control over their lives than children do. And therefore, when an adult makes a decision to surrender, we're surrendering to an isolated thing within a context of, by and large, determining our own fate, by and large, self-empowered decision. And little by little, we can get better at surrendering to more and more. But for us, the thing is the thing we're surrendering to. For a child, the whole context is surrender. And I think that's important to remember when we, are making demands of a child, or we're managing a moment in which a child is struggling with something. Or it doesn't necessarily mean that I always need to back down and let them and assume that they can't do it, or it doesn't mean there's no single right way to effectively deal with moments like this. But I'm just naming my own bias, which I think is to assert my boundary, as I was saying before, as opposed to noticing that. And whenever I do it, it triggers a response. It doesn't get a good response. So I need to think about, like, okay, well, what is this really about? Like, why do I keep getting that response, and why do I not stop? What would it take for me to catch it before I go there, and then be able to be soft? And surrender myself, and maybe to enter into some kind of empathic understanding of exactly what that child is going through. And before I go and push again, or so I'm asking myself to catch those moments one beat earlier. One beat earlier. And be conscious and be gentle. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.